Welcome to the show, everybody. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here. We got a great show for you guys today, but don't mess up the intro. Welcome to the show. Boy, do we have a lot of important stories. So, of course, we're going to talk about Trump, Syria. We also have Ukraine. We'll talk about that as well. Then we're going to talk about Ellen. So I have a few thoughts on that situation. Really interesting stuff. And then we have video game news. I know we don't normally do video game stuff on this channel, but this is really important. It ties into the Hong Kong protests. So, yeah, should be really interesting. By the way, I'm going to give full credit to Adrian P. for creating that flashy, nice new intro that I've got there. So thank you, Adrian. That's super awesome. I absolutely love it. I do love that intro graphic. So it really is amazing. All right. So that said, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. So there's been this, and you guys know it's the same story, right? So every few months, YouTube cracks down and makes it really, really difficult for small independent channels to be able to grow. So Rational National was just recently hit by it. His subscribers plummeted, his non-subscribed views, and that's why. His non-subscribed views plummeted. And now look, we're seeing the same thing. So I've got my channel, my analytics down the freaking toilet. So disaster. So what I need from you guys is to share. YouTube has definitely put it heavy on the subscriber front. So that's why, and it's interesting because I did a Bernie Sanders story yesterday about his plan to go after money in politics. Really, really important policy stuff. 600 views, guys. I have 126,000 subscribers. 600, just over 600 views. That's disastrous. And look, it's not just that video, which obviously underperformed. And look, policy stuff generally does tend to underperform. But all the stuff about Ukraine, President Trump, Giuliani, 1,000, 2,000 views respectively. So YouTube is messing with things. It's making it so that subscribers don't generally see video, like actual like video announcements that they're being released. And not only that, but it's heavily reliant on subscribers to watch and share that video. So what I need you guys to do is to share. Share all the clips that you can. Share all the videos. All the videos, if you could, please. And that helps it get things out. Because, again, we put out a lot of content. 4 to 5, sometimes 6 videos a day. And if the majority of those videos are not seen, then not only do we not get our message out, but we don't attract new subscribers and we don't have any growth. And that's what I've been seeing right now. So I know YouTube's messing with stuff. The same thing, again, Rational National, David Dole, great guy, great reporter. He's been just destroyed by YouTube. And a lot of other people have as well. And so share. Very, very important to do so. Also, you can become patrons as well. You don't have to, but that also goes away, a long way to combat the YouTube crackdown to make it, and it helps me not be so reliant on YouTube views and revenue. So there's that. So very important to do. At least share, and because that's really, really, really important. So that's it. Let's thank some patrons, by the way. So patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank Tom Dwyer, Trevor Reeves, Sim Vong, and Vaughn Jenkins. So those are our $5 members, $5 supporters. That's a significant amount of money per month. So thank you for your support. Definitely appreciate that. You guys help continue to grow the show, such as it is. Okay. Anyway, so let's dive into our first story. We have Donald Trump and Ukraine. We have a very important, actually, development in that. All right. So let's take a look. Now, the Trump administration has just blocked Gordon Sondland, President Trump's ambassador to the EU, from testifying before Congress on Tuesday in relation to Trump and Ukraine. So now, earlier this morning, according to the law firm representing Sondland, the U.S. Department of State directed Ambassador Gordon Sondland not to appear today for a scheduled transcribed interview before the U.S. House of Representatives Joint Committee. Ambassador Sondland had previously agreed to appear voluntarily today without the need for a subpoena in order to answer the committee's questions on an expedited basis. So that's really important to point out. Sondland's like, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, I'll go in front of Congress and answer their questions. But wait, that's not necessarily indicative of anything. So let's not jump to conclusions on that part. I will leave that to later, where I will jump to many conclusions. But so now the report continues. As a sitting U.S. ambassador to the EU and employee of the State Department, Ambassador Sondland is required to follow the department's direction. So that, again, that's the end of the statement there. So here we have the administration blocking the testimony of somebody who's deeply involved in the Ukraine scandal. No, there's nothing fishy about that. Now, what's interesting is, again, Sondland did want to testify, and that's worthy of note. The statement describes Sondland as being, quote, profoundly disappointed, and noted that he traveled from Brussels to Washington for the testimony and to prepare. So, make me travel all this way, and then you're just going to block me? Well, then what's the point? Why was I even here? Now, Ambassador Sondland, and again, here's the interesting part. Ambassador Sondland believes strongly that he acted at all times in the best interest of the United States, and he stands ready to answer the committee's questions fully and truthfully, the statement notes. Ambassador Sondland hopes that the issues raised by the State Department that preclude his testimony will be resolved promptly. He stands ready to testify on short notice whenever he is permitted to appear. So, again, Sondland, ready to go, not able to go. Donald Trump's blocking him. And yet, here's the thing. Sondland is probably going to defend Donald Trump based on the text messages. So this is a little strange. So now Trump took to Twitter and he said this, quote, I would love to send Ambassador Sondland, a really good man and great American, to testify. But unfortunately, he would be testifying before a totally compromised kangaroo court, where Republicans' rights have been taken away and true facts are not allowed out for the public to see. That statement is bonkers. Do you expect anything else from Trump? Not really. But I would love to know which rights the Republicans have had taken away from them. Really now. I mean, you don't even know. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know. Because there have been no rights taken away. So complete and total fabrication. Fake news, if you will, right? But he continues. He said, importantly, Ambassador Sondland's tweet, which few report, I've reported it, stated, I believe you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear. No quid pro quos of any kind. That says it all. And by the way, the president calls it a tweet. It's actually a text. Small minor point, but I feel like I have to correct him on that because, facts do matter. But okay. So, as far as it's saying it all, yeah, it kind of does say it all. Remember in the text exchange between him and Bill Taylor, Sondland, Taylor told Sondland that, quote, it was crazy to tie Ukrainian military assistance to the country helping the president's electoral prospects. He's crazy. It's crazy. What are you doing? Not only is it crazy, it's also against the law. You cannot solicit a foreign country's help when it comes to an election. And what Sondland was doing And look, all these veteran diplomats were doing were dangling a potential meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump, and then later on, military assistance for Ukraine that was passed through Congress that the Trump administration decided to arbitrarily hold up before these talks happen to try to get the country of Ukraine to do an investigation into Joe Biden, which is Donald Trump's political opponent. Okay, well, so now here's the thing. There doesn't need to be quid pro quo to impeach. There just doesn't. So you don't have to. It's purely political. It is a political tool to remove someone from office, or as Lindsey Graham likes to put it, remove the stain from the Oval Office. Okay, there you go. So now, here's the thing. Sondland had tweeted, now I did it. No, he texted back a message to Bill Taylor after that, or I should say before that, and said, look, we need to take this offline. No quid pro quo. Let's talk online. So that was after Taylor said this was crazy. Okay, so now the reason that they take it offline, I'm speculating here, but it's because there's no paper trail. We don't know what they talked about. We don't have the phone records or conversations, right? There's no transcript of that. But you could kind of imagine the kind of discussions they had offline. And in fact, Taylor had referenced one such conversation in those texts. So that's when he said, it's crazy, because he didn't actually, before that tweet, say anything about that in such explicit terms. So, yeah. Okay, now, here's the thing. So it appears that this is quite indefensible. The administration probably knows that, which is why Trump's main defense is, it was the perfect call. It was a great call. It was a tremendous call. Well, sure, it was tremendous because, again, Zelensky said, hey, by the way, I stayed in Trump Tower. By the way, we're going to buy Javelin missiles from you. By the way, yes, we are interested in going after corruption in Ukraine. Now, that corruption didn't involve any apparent Ukrainians because none of those guys were mentioned. No Ukrainian names. But you did have Joe Biden and you did have CrowdStrike. Which is why, of course, Donald Trump was very interested because he buys into these conspiracy theories where, Joe Biden is apparently doing some personal corruption. Now, look, is there corruption? Absolutely. It's systemic corruption. I point this out every time I do this story because I want to hammer it home. I want to let you guys know that what Hunter Biden is doing or had done, getting paid $50,000 a month to set on a Ukrainian gas company simply because he has the last name Biden is fundamentally wrong. But it's not illegal. So that's an important thing to point out, an important thing to mention. Again, systemic corruption versus personal corruption, which Donald Trump is engaging in, that personal corruption, in order to help his political chances in the upcoming election because he believes that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee. Again, legal, right? You can't do that. So now, if the call was perfect, and if Sondland, again, according to the text, is more than happy and willing to parrot Donald Trump talking points, Trump administration talking points, and to defend the president, well, then why block him? It doesn't make any sense. Unless the whole purpose here is to stick it to Democrats. I mean, Donald Trump's tweet kind of says it all. He's folding his arms and saying, no, I'm just not going to let it happen. It doesn't matter. I'm just not going to let you have the satisfaction of listening to Bill Sondland. Okay, well, see, again, Sondland wants to go. Congress can issue a subpoena, but right now nobody seems to want to show up anyway to the subpoenas. They're just laughing at the subpoenas. And they're laughing at Democrats in Congress, which, look, kind of makes sense at this point. And I'm going to explain why. See, my problem is, and I think a lot of us on the left have this problem, is that We're trying to analyze this from a rational point of view. Even when it comes to Trump, oh, there must be some sort of strategy. Oh, there must be some sort of, plan and action. No, no, no. There's no plan. There's a strategy. The answer is simple, and it's right in front of us. He just wants to own the libs. That's it. That's the whole point. That's the whole purpose. Own the libs to get Democrats upset because him and his base, by the way, they thrive off this. They thrive off anger and they don't have policy, right? So they go, ironically, to emotion. That emotion is, well, there are two emotions right now that explain the conservative movement: disgust and rage. And right now, Trump appeals to both of those. And so that's what it is. It's about trolling the libs. It's about owning the libs. It's insane that it's gotten to this point. But look, it makes all sorts of sense, right? Again, Sondland, he's not going to testify against Donald Trump. He's a massive Trump donor that just got a job because not just, but he had gotten a job simply because he gave a boatload of money to Donald Trump into his campaign. He's not going to give bombshell testimony. Trump knows that. Again, it's just going to be him probably lying. Or maybe he doesn't even have to lie. He just says, here's the text. This is what I said. No quid pro quo. I said it. I meant it. There it is. And so here's the thing. Donald Trump does not actually care about that actual, testimony. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what Sondland has to say. He's turned up the petty to 11. That's what it is. You can't, you want to talk to Sondland? Can't. Now what are you going to do, Pelosi? What are you going to do, Nancy? Well, if you're Nancy Pelosi, you could do plenty. In fact, you could call it contempt of Congress. Anybody who dodges a subpoena, you can say, you don't want to come testify before Congress about this impeachment investigation. All right, well, let me just give a call out to the sergeant at arms here, and let's have you explain it to him. There's literally a jail cell built into Congress, into the congressional building. The sergeant at arms can literally go arrest someone for resisting a subpoena. This is not a request. This is an impeachment inquiry now. So if you don't want to come and answer the subpoena, then we will come and arrest you. It's fairly simple, right? Now, is that going to happen? No. I don't think so. Nancy Pelosi is not going to go start arresting people. And Donald Trump, he knows that. The Trump administration knows that. Trump is betting and counting on her weakness because all she has shown, all the Democrats ever show, is weakness. And ironically, if she actually does summon up the courage to do so, which again, I highly doubt, Donald Trump and his base will scream bloody murder. The entire Republican Party will scream bloody. I can't. How are you arresting people? Authoritarians. We knew it. Big government stepping on everyone. You can't win, right? And so it's politically risky. And if there's even an ounce of political risk, Nancy Pelosi, you can be assured that Nancy Pelosi will not do a damn thing. That and because, again, Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump, they're both members of the club. The number one rule of the club is never harm your fellow members. But wait a minute. But she's launching an impeachment inquiry, Jeff. That doesn't make sense. No. Here's the thing about that. Impeachment inquiry is purely political. If there's a successful impeachment, nobody goes to jail. Nobody goes to prison. Nobody gets punished. What happens? Again, if this impeachment inquiry turns into full-blown articles, and there's a trial by the Senate, it's very likely that Senate Republicans will not convict Donald Trump and remove him from office anyway. But in the very unlikely scenario in which that does happen, well, then Donald Trump, the worst that happens to him is he loses his job. Just gets removed from office, goes back to civilian life, makes a buttload of money being on Fox News. members of the club, man. So look, I don't think Nancy Pelosi will do what's necessary. And Trump knows that. So he knows that he can get away with blocking anything and everything and essentially run out the clock. That's essentially the whole point. Okay. Let's move on. There we go. Now, recently, the president has announced that U.S. forces will be leaving Syria. In fact, they're withdrawing like immediately. So now, according to reports, the White House announced late Sunday night, without consulting allies in the region or members of Congress, of course, that Trump had agreed in a phone call with Turkish President Erdogan to let Turkey occupy a strip of northern Syria. Okay, so now the Turks, they're getting ready to go into that area. Now, that area is currently controlled by ethnic Kurds. And so the problem is the Kurds happen to be one of the United States' most effective allies in the fight against the Islamic State. You remember Islamic State, ISIS? One of the most, biggest threat to, Western democracy, according to President Trump, Republicans. The whole reason that we're in Syria to begin with? Yeah, those guys, right? I know. Like ancient history at this point, right? So now, look, ISIS is basically defeated, right? So it would make sense that we leave Syria. But wait, there's where things get complicated, okay? So that northern strip of Syria, like I said before, is ethnically Kurdish. The Turkish government now considers these Kurds to be part of a terrorist group, which is why they're getting ready to roll in the tanks. So now there is the PKK. They're a Kurdish separatist group. They want to form an autonomous Kurdish region within Turkey. Obviously, the Turkish government does not like that, and so they consider them a terrorist group. So now there are other groups, and there's a Syrian Kurdish group called the YPG, which is considered to be an offshoot of the PKK. I know it's getting like super heavy, right? So now, the again Syrian group, ethnic Kurds, who were a major component of the U.S.-led effort to defeat the Islamic State in Syria. So now they've had a lot of successes being backed by the United States, and now control about a third of the country. Okay, so now the Turkish government also views the YPG as a security threat due to its ties to separatist Kurds in Turkey, and now wants to push the group back from its border, create something called like a safe zone. And so, again, that's where it gets super, super complicated. Because in order to create that quote unquote safe zone, they have to literally invade Syria. Okay. So now, the thing is, in 2015, when the Syrian Democratic Force was created under the U.S. to fight the Islamic State, a lot of YPG members formed the backbone of that force. So now we're allies, right? Or we were allies. But Turkey also our ally. In fact, they're part of NATO. They have the second largest army in NATO. Okay. So again, the United States decides, okay, well, now here's what we're going to do. Now that we've used the Kurds to beat the Islamic State, after arming them and working with them and promising to protect them from the Turks, now we're just going to leave. We're going to leave without setting up a framework for withdrawal. We're going to leave without, making sure to protect our allies in the region that helped us with the Islamic State. We're just going to leave. Just like that. Gone. There's a little bit of a problem with that. They're going to get slaughtered. The Kurds are, and so look, what this would be? This would be about if we end up letting the Kurds get slaughtered. This would be the 8th time that we have used and then backstabbed the Kurds. And by we, I do mean mostly in the West, but mostly the United States. So, and the reason is, of course, I say that is because we have used them in the past to disrupt governments that are hostile to the United States or to the energy interests of the United States. So now, here's the thing. I don't want to be in Syria. I don't want our forces in the Middle East. But, and I also don't want to be enemies of Turkey, right? Again, they're one of our biggest NATO allies in the region. At the same time, the Kurds should not get slaughtered once again. Again, there are 40 million ethnic Kurds. They're spread across Iraq, Syria, and in that region, and they don't have a place of their own. And so, in places like even Turkey, they're being oppressed. Now, I'm not saying they're all 100% being oppressed, but, generally there's this consensus they're being treated a bit like second-class citizens. And so that's a huge problem, okay? So now this is a situation that we find ourselves in. And it's not an easy situation. It's very nuanced, very complicated. And it's not the kind of situation where you want somebody like Donald Trump being in charge. So now let me get to Donald Trump's statements on this, because they go from insane to even crazier. So now on Monday, he said, quote, "It is time for us to get out of these ridiculous endless wars," that I agree with, "many of them tribal, and bring our soldiers home." Wait. What are you talking about, tribal? Turkey's not a tribe. They're an incredibly modern, pretty powerful nation, and they're actually a pretty good Western democracy in the area. That is until, of course, Erdogan started turning it into a more of a non-secular sort of fundamentalist country. And so he's done a lot to try to subvert those values of democracy and secularism within Turkey. And look, Turkey was very proud of being secular. And so under Erdogan, there's been a lot of removals of rights, and again, a resurgence in Islamic fundamentalism in that area. So that's not good, right? And of course, no wonder Donald Trump gets along with Erdogan, because he is a proto-fascist. So anyway, now, second largest army in NATO still. They are our ally, but they're not a tribe. And it goes to show how Donald Trump feels about certain, groups of people. Okay? So now, I do want our forces out, but very complicated. And so when people pointed that out, that this is very complicated and that we are basically allowing the Kurds to get slaughtered, Trump said this, quote, "If Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits," and he doesn't spell out what those limits are, "I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done it before." When did you destroy the Turkish economy? What is going on here? This is not how you handle this situation. You don't threaten just another one of our allies, even if it means trying to protect other allies. No. If we actually had an adult in the room, and mainly somebody with progressive foreign policy, we would find a way to not only honor our promises of protection to the Kurds, while also making sure not to make an enemy of our allies in Turkey. Again, we need someone who is well-versed and understands the nuances of this situation and understands how to approach this, making sure that we don't alienate allies on both sides so they can come to a peaceable resolution. Okay? Again, the relationship is super complicated. There are Kurds that live in Turkey. Some have ascended to power within Turkey. So it's not as if this is a divide that is too big to bridge. What we need is somebody to encourage them to find a way to get along. And the U.S., I think, could play a positive role in fostering that kind of diplomacy. But unfortunately, we're not doing that. Instead, we seem to be, again, abandoning the Kurds to what could be a complete and utter slaughter. And so, unfortunately, that's what you get with someone like President Trump in charge. Terrible foreign policy. Okay. All right. But there's more in the story. Okay. Now, several days after President Trump's decision to abandon Syrian Kurds, we find out that it might have something to do with President's personal investments. Now, President Trump appears to have properties in Istanbul. In fact, Trump Tower, Istanbul. So that investment, that property, was built in Turkey's capital about 7 years ago. So, in fact, Erdogan, the then country's prime minister, attended the grand opening of the twin skyscraper project. And you know who was there to congratulate him? Ivanka Trump. In fact, there's a tweet on April 12th, 2012, that said, "Thank you, Prime Minister Erdogan, for joining us yesterday to celebrate the launch of Trump Towers Istanbul." So, yeah, that was Ivanka back in 2012. So, yeah, that happened. So, now, President Trump, obviously the President of the United States, Ivanka, one of the White House aides, who doesn't actually do anything, but other than, of course, profit off being in the White House and being a Trump. If you're mad about Biden, you should be incredibly angry about Ivanka Trump. I wonder how many MAGA people will feel the same kind of anger at this sort of nepotism going on in the White House. But okay. So now, Donald Trump has refused to divest from his businesses, from the Trump organization, and so he's getting money to this day from Trump Tower Istanbul. I wonder if that has anything to do with his decision to back Turkey, his Turkish allies, or our Turkish allies, I should say. And look, they are our allies. Don't get me wrong. They, again, have the second largest army in NATO. They're an excellent partner when it comes to stabilization of the Middle East. But at the same time, we also have our allies, the Kurds, that helped us fight ISIS. And so we can't turn our backs on them. So again, an incredibly complicated situation. And now we have an element of personal corruption to throw into the mix. Now, this is what a lot of people, a lot of critics of Trump have been trying to point out. In fact, this is Jordan Leibowitz, communications director for the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. He said this, quote, "We've warned for years that Trump's decision to hold on to his business empire, particularly in the properties in places like Turkey, would one day lead to a national security decision shrouded by his conflicts of interest." And that, of course, appears to be the case. So now, a financial disclosure that Donald Trump had filed in May claims that he earned between $100,000 and $1 and $1 million from the Istanbul project in the last year, the same range he claimed for the previous year. In a June 2017 filing, Trump claimed he'd earned between $1 and $5 million from the project in the preceding 12 months. So Donald Trump, let's be clear, is making money from Trump Tower Istanbul, which is why we have, in the past, made presidents divest from their business so that they do not make decisions based on their profit motive. I mean, it should be incredibly clear that you can't do that, but Donald Trump has taken corruption to new open heights. But here's how the White House responds. Quote, this is Stephanie Grisham. She said that the decision had nothing to do with Trump Tower's Istanbul building complex. Of course not, she said. No, of course not. And we're just supposed to believe you. Now, look, I'm not saying that's the only reason. No, I think Donald Trump is deeply ignorant of the situation, like everything else, because he doesn't read, he doesn't care about briefings, he just doesn't care about learning facts. And so, and let me give you an example of that, by the way. Uh, he called this situation a tribal conflict. Again, Turkey isn't exactly a tribe. Just saying. They're a very industrial, modern country. They've got the second largest army in NATO, and the United States. And by the way, the United States, when it comes to the Kurds, have relied on Kurdish fighters for decades, not just in the fight against ISIS, but against Iraq and other places. So, and by the way, every time we ended up stabbing them in the back. Very important distinction, right? So, in fact, we've done this 7 times so far. And if we go through this, of course, and don't protect the Kurds from what could be a complete massacre by Turkish forces, we're on track for an 8th time. So, now, Grisham says, oh, no, of course, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump's businesses. Well, Grisham doesn't have a good track record. On August 15th, for example, Grisham described as inaccurate a report that Trump was encouraging Israel to prohibit Representative Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib from entering the country of Israel. Within the hour, Trump tweeted, it would show great weakness if Israel allowed Omar and Tlaib to visit. Inaccurate. Totally. Now, previously, Trump's press office had also denied that Trump knew about his former lawyer's payment, Michael Cohen, to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Trump had conspired with Cohen to make a $130,000 payment. Cohen is currently serving in prison. Donald Trump, the co-conspirator, is president of the United States. Not buying it. Not buying any of it. Okay. So now, apart from the Istanbul project, Turkish officials, including the trade minister, the defense minister, and the ambassador to the United States, have made 14 separate visits to Trump's hotel a few blocks from the White House since his inauguration. I'm sure that has nothing to do with any of that. No, they know. Just like any other world leader knows that if you want business between Donald Trump and you want Donald Trump to meet with you or do favors for you, then all you have to do is pay to play, because that's how this works. He is deeply personally corrupt. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break. I'll come back, read some comments, maybe some super chats if there are any, and then we'll come back and do more stories, including why a lot of people are pretty angry at Ellen. So we'll talk about that. Stay right here around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so I've got a lot of comments here, but first I'm going to give a shout out to Jeanette Villalona. Thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. Okay, and then some comments as well from members. So let's go to Jeanette. Says, but our allies aren't going to trust us if war happens here, we're screwed. So that's the problem, right? And so right now, there's very little confidence that Trump is going to honor his word. Again, the Iran deal, perfectly fine deal, ripped it up. You also had the Paris Climate Agreement, non-binding agreement between many different countries to cut emissions, which they haven't, by the way. A lot of them haven't. And Donald Trump rips it up. He doesn't care about international agreements, at least none made by him. And by the way, his great diplomacy has actually has actually accomplished nothing. And so, look, I want to get a deal with North Korea where they denuclearize. I was in favor of that. Not like other pundits that are like, oh, how dare you talk to evil? No. Look, do diplomacy with Iran, do diplomacy with North Korea. If you come up with a plan where North Korea decides, yeah, we're going to denuclearize, we're going to at least stop nuclear testing, we're going to do all, cut down on that, maybe do something about it, human rights abuses, and Donald Trump does that, I'll give him all the credit in the world because that would be an amazing feat. And actually prove that they'll do it. Wonderful. That would be great. Unfortunately, North Korea is still doing what North Korea was doing before. And we've just kind of forgotten about it. Come on. So, disaster, right? But back to our allies not being able to trust us. I mean, we haven't really shown to be trustworthy. And now backstabbing the Kurds, even worse. Okay, more. Star Trek says, I'm having a feeling that this will end a disaster as usual for the Democrats, referring to impeachment, of course. The American people want this guy out of office. Do your job, Pelosi. There was a recent new poll that came out, 58% support an impeachment inquiry. And I think it was about 49% want inquiry and, want impeachment and conviction by the Senate. Those are disastrous numbers. And so we'll see what happens on that. And then we have Jup James saying, when the fighting between the Kurds and the Turkish forces begins, Erdogan will start another attack on the Kurds in Turkey and cleanse all offices of Kurdish people. That's what I'm afraid of. That's such a good point. And it's why that this is just this recent betrayal. All of them have been pretty bad, but this recent betrayal might be the worst. Yikes. Okay. And then criticism here, because I read criticism. Harriet Garr says, the bastard cut food stamps. Do you really give a crap that the most corrupt president in the history of corrupt presidents made a shady phone call? Yes, and look, I do care about that. I also care about food stamps. Again, I've talked about his numerous efforts to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the SNAP program. So yes, we talk about that stuff. And that's standard, unfortunately, that is standard Republican fare. They want to cut all these social services for the poor and the needy. And that is something that we all expect from Republicans. What's different about Trump is that he is more openly and brazenly, personally corrupt. So yeah, we do care about that. We can care about both things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time and be outraged about all of it. So anyway, so there's that. Okay, move on. Let's talk about something other than Donald Trump. I know, right? Shocker. Let me just switch these out. Okay, here we go. Now, recently, a photo of Ellen DeGeneres sparked a lot of backlash. And not because of her specifically, but because of who she was sitting next to and apparently having a really good time with. So let me show you that photo here. So, all right, well, that appears to be Ellen sitting there laughing with George W. Bush. And Cowboys owner Jerry Jones special box, right? And the reason that I point out the box, of course, is that this is something that regular people do not have access to. So there it is. Now, a lot of people very justifiably angry about this, and for good reason. George W. Bush did a lot of terrible things while he was in office, including lying us into a disastrous war with Iraq. You guys remember that? The whole Iraq thing? Yeah. Okay, so now Ellen, after she gets backlash online, a lot of tweets, she goes on her show and she defends herself by saying this, quote, "Here's the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think we've forgotten that that's okay, that we're all different." Oh, boy. So, look, I'm a little fired up about this. A little angry. So, number one, she sounds like the Republican. Generally, it's conservatives that say this. So much for the tolerant left. They're attacking their own for sitting with George W. Bush. Well, you know why? The left isn't really tolerant of war criminals. I don't know if you know this, but again, George W. Bush killed over 1 million innocent Iraqis. Just saying, war criminal. Okay, no, she continues. For instance, I wish people wouldn't wear fur. I don't like it, but I'm friends with people who wear fur. Well, okay, but you're comparing people who, like to wear fur with a war criminal. That's not really a good comparison, Ellen. But she says, just because I don't agree with someone on everything doesn't mean that I'm going to be not going to be friends with them. When I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only the people that think that the same way that you do. I mean be kind to everyone. Being kind to everyone, again, doesn't extend to people who have done horrible things. And that's what George W. Bush has done. Look, I've got conservative family. I don't really have any conservative friends anymore. And look, I don't agree with them on a lot, right? And look, that's fine. When it comes to things like, man, I don't think businesses should be taxed so much. You can have an honest, earnest disagreement about that. Or, man, I wish business didn't regulate so much, or weren't regulated so much by the government. Okay, looking up conversation, soda taxes, any of that stuff, that's fine to have disagreements on that stuff. Okay. But when it comes to differences like the murder of over 1 million innocent Iraqis, I tend to draw the line at that. And I think most people should. Not only did Bush lie us into a disastrous war for oil, but as a result of the war, we have tens of thousands of U.S. veterans. They're scarred on both the inside and the outside by this war. We had trillions of dollars that were wasted with no benefit. The U.S. is no safer than before, and the Middle East is a disaster. This isn't just about a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president. It's about the rehabilitation of a horrible person. You are normalizing, through this behavior, war criminals. George W. Bush should be tried at The Hague for his war crimes, instead of laughing it up with someone that, when he was president, by the way, tried to pass a constitutional amendment to stop gay Hollywood liberals from being able to marry each other. I mean, but you know what this is, though? This is the situation. It's not right versus left. This is the powerful. This is the 1% versus the 99%. Ellen has been accepted by the elite. She is a member of the elite. She used to not be accepted, by the way. And back then, I was firmly on her side. But now, she's accepted. She's part of the club. The same club George W. Bush, the Obamas, and yes, even Donald Trump is part of. You don't think at some point Donald Trump will also end up being rehabilitated by the same liberals that are calling for his head? Come on. Oh, that'll never happen. Donald Trump is literally the worst. Oh, until someone else who's worse comes along. Literally, they said the same thing about George W. Bush. Oh, I'll never forget Bush. Terrible, horrible person. Now you have liberals out there on Twitter, and you have liberals like Ellen that are defending George W. Bush. Disastrous. And you know why? It's because they're all members of the club. That club that you and I and everyone who isn't extremely wealthy will never, ever be a part of. This is a story about class solidarity. And Ellen shows that she's put class over anything else. I'm not going to be civil about this. Okay. All right. So, let's go to the last story here. Video game publisher Blizzard Entertainment has suspended the winner of a gaming championship after he voiced solidarity with Hong Kong protesters. So now, the massive protests had actually begun back in March. So the aim of the protests is to oppose the introduction of something called the Fugitive Offenders Amendment that was proposed by the Hong Kong government. So that bill essentially would allow local authorities to detain and extradite supposed criminal fugitives who are wanted in territories to which Hong Kong does not currently have extradition agreements. Now, that includes Taiwan, and mainland China. And I'm so sorry that I keep butchering these, and I don't know why. But okay, so now let me give you some more information about this, right? So now the protests started, I guess, fairly small, relatively, but actually grew massive in June. And yes, there's been instances of violence. You had instances of police brutality against the protesters, different groups getting involved, etc. Right? And so, what the protesters are fighting for, though, ultimately, is autonomy and civil liberties against what appears to be encroaching Chinese authoritarianism. And so, now where Blizzard comes into play is that after winning a Hearthstone Grandmasters match on October 6th. By the way, I've never played Hearthstone or Hearthstone. I have played World of Warcraft. I do play Diablo, and so I am a gamer, and so I am definitely familiar with esports. And so this is Hong Kong-based Chung Blitzchung in Y. There's no way I said that correctly. But after he had won this championship, which is a really, really big thing, right? He used his post-game interview to support the protests, which I think is absolutely fine. I think it's super ballsy because he is based in Hong Kong. So now, Chung appeared on the Taiwanese broadcast wearing a gas mask after his win against South Korean player Jang Don-honjae. No way I said that right. So, now, that's significant, right? Last week, Hong Kong government issued a ban on face masks. So you can't wear face masks when you're out in public now because demonstrators in Hong Kong have been wearing them to protect themselves not only from tear gas, but also government reprisal to protect their identities. And so a face mask is now a symbol of protests, right? So now this guy, Blitz Chung, he wears this mask on this interview, takes it off, and says essentially, liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our time. So that's, of course, a slogan associated with these protests. So now, right after this had happened, the Hearthstone broadcast cut away. Get it off the air, get it off the air. And a recording of the interview on the Taiwanese stream had also been taken offline. So now, okay. Seems to be they had a little bit of a problem with that. Which, look, kind of a benign statement, but then when you realize how involved Activision Blizzard is with the Chinese government, well, then it starts to become clear why they did this. So now, Chung, by the way, Blitzchung is from Hong Kong, right? That's his home. So in a statement to Invent Global, Chung said this, quote, as you know, there are serious protests in my country now. My call on stream was just another form of participation in the protest that I wish to grab more attention. I put so much effort in that social movement in the past few months that I sometimes couldn't focus on preparing my Grandmaster match. Well, Didn't seem to affect it because he did really well. Uh, he continued, I know what my action on stream means. It could cause me a lot of trouble, even my personal safety in real life, but I think it is my duty to say something about the issue. I love it. I do. I do. So using his platform, using his win to call out something, that is a huge problem right now. And that's of course Chinese basically intervention in Hong Kong and the crushing of people's civil liberties. So, but you know who didn't love it? Activision Blizzard. Now, Activision Blizzard has a giant Chinese audience. World of Warcraft actually, look, and it's not just World of Warcraft. There are video games, there are movies that do incredibly well in China that make these corporations billions and billions of dollars. So now, World of Warcraft, by the way, millions of subscribers in China. And so what they've done, of course, since Chinese government has control over all the internet, they can block who, you know, basically what people see, what they play, how long they play. I mean, the censorship there is just completely insane. They had blocked World of Warcraft there before because the undead showed bones. Can't have that imagery. So Blizzard completely changed their local client in China in order to reflect that. So now the undead look completely different there. Monsters look completely different there in the game. I mean, it's crazy the amount of censorship and control that the government has when it comes to video games and other media in China. So now, if Blizzard offends the Chinese government in some way, they can be banned and they lose out billions and billions of dollars. So now, they've embraced censorship. How so? Because they've suspended Chung from Hearthstone esports for at least a year, originally banned him, and has removed him from the Grandmasters program. So he's banned from that completely, and he will not receive any prize money earned for this season. So he won legitimately. And yet, Blizzard says, I'm sorry, you offended Chinese, and we value money over everything, corporate profits. We don't want to lose that market. So we're going to embrace we're going to embrace this censorship. And that's what this is about. It's not about the prize money. It's about a large corporation bending to the will of an oppressive regime so they can make a buck. That's what this is about. There is so much wrong going on in the gaming industry right now. I mean, look, I could go on about a whole bunch of issues, right? For example, you've got labor problems when it comes to the gaming industry, crushing their employees, making developers do 70 to 80-hour weeks, stressful conditions, sexual harassment, exploitive practices when it comes to consumers, like lockboxes, unfinished games being released, DLCs. Now, there's a whole lot of issues in gaming. Look at Anthem, for example. Absolute disaster. And so now, to add on to that, you have one of the biggest companies, again, behind Diablo, Warcraft, practicing censorship on behalf of the Chinese Communist government, punishing someone who had an opinion that offends one of their biggest consumer groups. That's what's going on today. And that's why, of course, Blizzard is facing gigantic calls for a boycott online. And you know what? Maybe it's time to support them. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for joining me, going around the nation. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please consider becoming a patron, supporting independent progressive media. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.